There we go. The lovely lady saying recording is in progress. So, welcome to everybody in the Hearthspace group who's joining us live. Welcome to everybody who is coming and joining us for the recording. I have with me today the beautiful, fabulous, intelligent, enchanting Sarita Deste, who is, Sarita is my first ever in-person magical teacher. So, the reason
Oh,
down to you. So I'm so
I'm
excited.
honored to have that.
Oh, well,
Um,
we could just have a love fest for the whole of the interview.
oh, Maggie, that would be great. I love you. You know that. You're great.
And well, I've invited Sarita here this evening because we've been working with the goddess Ran, who is a goddess of the sea in the Norse pantheon. She's not that well known. We don't know a huge amount about her. We've been diving into her. I did an introductory session in the Hearthspace group. We've done rune readings about her. We did this. We did an oracular story session with her today. So I'm really loving working with her. And the theme that she wanted us to explore was enchantment and illusion. And I thought to myself, well, who better to invite to come and discuss that theme than the enchantress extraordinaire herself, Sarita Deste. So that is why you are here, Sarita. Thank you so much for agreeing to join us. I don't know, maybe it would just be nice for you to say a little bit about, how we know each other from your end.
Well, so firstly, Maggie, thank you so much for having me. And this is such a wonderful topic to be discussing with you. And I can't wait to see where this is actually going to take us. It should be super interesting, I think. I obviously met you more than, I think, 20 years ago now in London when we were all, young and enthusiastic and wanting to learn about magic. And we were all part of a community that I co-founded. And that was an amazing experience. It's just such a beautiful group of people coming together with the goal of creating a community of peers, which I think this kind of proves it worked,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And as you know, the Norse gods isn't my huge big passion in life. I'm far more leaning towards the like Hellenic polytheism, Roman, Egyptian, Mediterranean, all the kind of gods from there. And also, of course, the gods that came to Britain. And some of the Norse gods are gods that came to Britain. And I can't really ignore that living where I do in Somerset, ancient Wessex, and all that kind of history surrounding me here as well. But it's not my big love, it's not my big passion. It's not something I'm terribly knowledgeable about. I always feel it's my like Achilles heel when it comes to polytheism and magic. I'm always like, oh, Norse gods. But I think there's a lot of correlations in the kind of I'm not very fond of archetypes as a polytheist, but the kind of archetypal roles that are taken by deities in the respective pantheons. There's definitely a lot of overlap. So I think this is going to be an amazing journey to have with you during this in conversation with. There's such a good term for it. And I think I'm going to probably learn as much as hopefully you will. Maybe we will uncover some new depths to illusion and enchantment over the next.
So. Yeah, I hope so. And I should say actually that in the Hearthspace, a lot of this community are like eclectic practitioners who work across pantheons. I know that there's a huge number of people who are devoted to Hecate, which is something that we obviously share is in common. And obviously, she is a sea goddess too. And
definitely,
yeah. So there's going to be interest, and yeah, that sense of there's not an archetypal. No, all sea goddesses are one sea goddess. That
no,
for me
they
is also
definitely play
something that I
different
find.
roles. Yeah.
Yeah, that idea of them helping us to be in relationship with the sea, and perhaps noticing that the seas are different, aren't they? They have different climates, they have different purposes. We have different relationships with them, depending on whether we're visiting the sea or whether we make our livelihood from the sea. All of these things play out with very specific relationships that deities can embody for us. And there is something, I think, when we go to the sea about that sense of being enchanted by it. and it possibly casting that little bit of illusion for us that we're safe when we go to the seaside and we have a lovely time, and that but it is a space that holds risk and danger, and that we need to respect it, comes through very strongly.
Yeah, I mean, the ocean, it's just that vastness. And, you know, I grew up near the seaside in Cape Town in South Africa. And, you know, often as a child, kind of just going and standing, you know, on the beach, and kind of Cape Town is it's got this kind of very Mediterranean climate sometimes, but it's also got storms that are just mega storms. It used to be called the Cape of Storms by the sailors that first kind of went there, because it was so dangerous, because the Indian and the Atlantic Oceans meet there, so you've just got strange currents and weather patterns and stuff. And you know, sometimes just going and standing by the foreshore, and this like an amazing big waves is probably quite dangerous to do. But it's just such a primal force, you know, this liminal kind of energy that just happens when you're standing between the kind of the air above and the ocean, the water, and the land, you know, and it's just between things, which I think is part of that magic. And you never know what's just on the other side, you know, and I think that's part of the mystery of it. The sea gives and it takes as well, a kind of life death kind of phenomena of it. You know, I'm a vegan, so I don't eat fish, but obviously for many generations all over the world, people have relied on food from the sea. But then at the same time, there's this kind of dangerous interplay with people dying at sea or just going missing mysteriously. So it's no surprise, really, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that theme of life and death comes through, I know, in the mysteries of water, but with the sea as well. If I think about the Vikings and perhaps the Anglo-Saxons a little bit as well, first of all, water is the place that we all come from. If you think about the waters of the womb, is the place of life. And then it was the place that a lot of the ancestors were returned to through sea burials, and burials where people would be placed in ships, even if they were on the land, you know, sort of evoking the spirit of the sea comes through. So yeah, I think you're right.
I mean, there's a lot of indigenous cultures around the world that's got this theme of, like, you know, serpents coming out of the ocean and being the first life, and, you know, this whole interplay with the mythology or life coming from the sea, which of course is partially true according to evolution as well, you know.
I know, which is always fascinating, isn't it, with those sorts of things where you go, well, we can't possibly, no one remembers that, and yet somehow there's an instinctive
there's definitely a lot of distinctive stories in mythology that, if you really carefully look at it, I mean, this is going off on a complete tangent, but if you really look at it, and including the kind of Greek myths of the kind of foundation and the creation of mankind, if you look at it in an allegorical way and then apply it to what we know of modern science, the two things seem to match up eerily, you know, and you think, oh, how is that possible, you know?
Yeah. I have my personal theory that I'm working on at the moment is that we had a long age of spiritual relationship that then has to dive beneath the surface to let us create this scientific relationship with the world, and that now we're weaving those together,
going full circle again,
going full circle and coming back, and that's our sort of job now, is to weave them together. But that's just my theory of the moment that I'm working with. I just wanted to say as well, I can see lots of people joining us live, which is lovely. So if, as Sorita and I are talking, if you have any questions for Sorita, please do pop them in the chat box and let us know what's resonating with you. Sometimes there's a lag for me seeing your questions, so please have patience if I don't see them straight away, but I will look to pass them on to Sorita. Which brings us beautifully on to my first question, which is, it's a linguistic question, really. I've done a lot of looking at the definitions of enchantment and illusion. I think I'm getting a little bit disappointed that they're actually, etymologically speaking, not that distinct, whereas for me they feel distinct. And so I would just be really, really interested to know, what distinctions do you draw between?
I think that for me it's obviously very different. I see the word illusion as something that is intended to deceive. it's always a state that deceives us, maybe not intentional, because I think we can sometimes create illusions for ourselves without maybe consciously doing so, right? So I think it's very much linked to that kind of mockery and illusion, which of course is also at the etymological root of the word. Whereas for me, enchantment is totally mixed up more with magic and witchcraft and the kind of use of certain tools or certain rituals or certain techniques, if you like, to create something that is different. Now, of course, you could say enchantment could be used to create an illusion. I mean, that is, I think, where it becomes messy. But I think it's about the perspective or the person in the story that you become. So, if you're the enchanter, you're taking control of the illusions around you, if you like. And I think if you're experiencing illusion, whether or not intentionally by creating it for yourself, but not realizing that's what you're doing, because I think there is a lot of that going on, unfortunately. Or whether you are stepping into somebody else's illusion, you're not quite in control of it. So, and I think also illusion for me kind of goes along with that, that fairy tale thing where you think you're seeing something, but it's not quite what you're seeing, but it's there to kind of trick you, that whole trickster mockery side that we associate with certain deities. I think that kind of illusion, and I think where this is interesting is I think illusion is part of a magical journey, because you need to kind of break through those illusions in order to step to the next place, if that makes sense. It's a constant shedding of illusions if you're walking a magical spiritual path. Whereas enchantment for me is more the kind of the technique of learning how to control these things around you and to bring a bit more magic into your life in one way or another for whatever purpose it might serve you as.
Yeah,
it's a wide subject,
Yeah, it is. It is a wide subject. And I really like your definitions. I like that sense of a person who is like an operant of enchantment, that there's knowledge, there's wisdom, there's almost a journey that you've already been on, and you know what tools to use.
Intention, intention.
Yeah, a conscious intentionality with enchantment, whereas illusion could be held, the source of illusion could be in the subconscious. It could be somewhere that you have no idea where it is, and so you are fooled yourself. That sense in which we can feed our own illusions by then doing things that are consistent with them and not seeing the bits that are shattering, which I think is part of that initiatory journey, isn't it? It's that sense of sometimes you start to notice the cracks.
You do, and when you're through that illusion, somehow it's like you can't. You look back on it, and you're like, how did I get there? How did I not see through that particular wall? But I guess that's part of the journey. I mean, for me, and from the perspective that I look at it, it's part of that mystical journey of the initiate, and it can take you anywhere as you kind of move through these different veils of one thing after the other that you need to kind of intentionally shatter around you.
Yeah.
And sometimes painfully, it might happen in a way that you don't expect. It might just happen without you wishing it to happen. And sometimes we want to hang on to illusions as well, because sometimes those illusions can serve us, to keep the peace or to just hang off the status quo. I think a really good example can really be found in Plato's Republic, is something I frequently bring up when these kinds of topics come up, where the person really wants to ultimately stay in the cave rather than face the reality.
The shadows on the cave wall.
Exactly. So I think it's a useful kind of analogy to kind of go and read that and really look at that story if you're not familiar with it and you're listening. It's I think it's a really good example of where we put ourselves when we're in an illusory state. We want to kind of stamp our feet, scream, shout, and fight and say we are right. And we've got the
Yes.
right to not face the light. We've got the right to not face the reality or the
Yeah.
truth of the matter.
And I think that touches upon the like rites of passage. We've talked about moving through from illusions, and that sense that maybe as in the child self needs the protection of illusion, that we're safe, everything is in control. I am safe in the place of my family, so that you root and you get that safety. And then natural process is that you then start to go, oh, hold on, my mum and dad are fallible, or everything that I thought isn't quite the right. And that's the process of growing up, is that pushing on the illusions and going, yeah, I'm ready for that, which is perhaps where illusion isn't always a bad thing. No, it's a natural thing or protective thing, until we get to the point when we're able to wield the wand of the enchanter ourselves. But when we're not able to, somebody else holds that for us.
Yeah, that somebody else can be our own subconscious, or just the things that we are conditioned to believe around us. There's so many layers to illusion, and I think it's never ending, the kind of things that we convince ourselves of sometimes that are just not helpful.
Yeah. It's one of the things we were discussing this actually in the Hearthspace this morning, after we did our story session, because Ran is a goddess. Her name means robber. She's got this trickery side in her. She sort of seems to be robbing the living, and she's often said to me, she said, well, you robbed me first. She says, you're always taking my fish. All I'm doing is taking something in return. But it's brought up this attention, a place of play, where we often value so highly, authenticity and integrity, sort of consistency, presenting the true self. How does that then work with deities, spirit guides, however you want to call them, who embody enchantment and illusion, who use enchantment and illusion, these sort of trickster deities or magical sorceress, are able to wield enchantment? How does that work with us?
Well, I'm quite fond of Hermes. So Hermes, of course, is the trickster and the god of thieves, especially the living, again, just like Ran is. And I don't know, it's a kind of interesting thing. I'm always laughing when I'm talking about Hermes. It's really impossible for me not to do that. But I think it's a question of kind of looking at it and maybe understanding the trickery coming from deities in a different way. I think that quite often when we are presented, if you're looking at the stories of the tricksters and stuff, they quite often trick humans into being more than they are. So kind of in a way, tricksters they can cause a lot of chaos in their wake, of course, depending on the situation, but they can also make us more than what we are. So it's kind of like they not quite making heroes, but maybe kind of towards that, like nudging us to just be more by tricking us, and in a way by letting us see that we've been tricked. And allowing us to see that in that fallibility that we've got, that weakness that we've got, and hopefully pushing us. Maybe not all of us will always rise to the occasion, but pushing us to just do that bit better, just to work that little bit harder, to look past the next time that happens. So I often think it's a little bit like that, and also like an evolutionary step, nearly, kind of changing things, not always being happy with the status quo. And I think a lot of people that are attracted to magic today, anyway, especially magic rather than just the spiritual devotional aspects, I think there's a large number of us that feel like we are not satisfied with the status quo, so we're always looking at pushing the boundaries, breaking the illusions around us. Of course, in the process of that, we can get caught in illusionary veils and stuff like that for a period of time as well. But hopefully, if we apply ourselves, we can break through those veils, be a little bit more than what we are, and you know, just be on that next step on the journey, as it were.
Yeah.
Of course, it kind of ties in with belief systems and all kinds of things, but that's how I see it. You know, I really think it's kind of part of that evolutionary journey pushing
Yeah.
us.
That really chimes me. I'm thinking about Hermes, definitely. I'm thinking about Odin. I'm always careful when Hermes and Odin are brought up in the same sentence, because people will bring them together and things like that. I know exactly, which is why I'm just doing something. I'm just going to caveat that for a minute. So there are some places where they share similarities. You know, the planet Mercury is ascribed to Odin,
Yeah.
runic astrology system, but they aren't the same. But that value of evolution, of learning and change and growth and challenging and testing is, I think, something that they definitely share. Maybe that sense that if we think about authenticity and integrity, they would probably say, well, I value truth more than I value like your comfortableness. I value wisdom more than I value the ignorance, you know, and that, yeah, the thief is, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like the rebel on the edges, sort of saying, that's a flaw in your system. I'm just going to test it. And I always imagine like Hermes, he often leaves a calling card, doesn't he? You know, is it like you say, is that sort of, I've tricked you, but it was me. Hi. You know, it's
And
that
there
piece.
goes the curtains on fire. Yes. So I think, well, I can't think of the right word, but it's making me think of that philosophical idea of the crack that lets the light in. You know, it's kind of like pushing and just showing us there's a different perspective on the matter, and we don't need to be so fixed. And I think if we rise to the occasion and follow and understand what these trickery things are about, if you like, then we can definitely kind of evolve ourselves. You know, I think if evolution for me is a big part of working with Hermes as a trickster in that role, because I think there's always unexpected things that are going to happen along the way, but you know, not in a unreasonable way when you look back on it. You know, there's always something to learn from it.
Yeah. And I think that piece about the chink of light is important, isn't it? It's that maybe I'm thinking about the role that fairy tales and myths take us in teaching us how society works. You know, all of those things about I was reading a quote recently. I can't remember who it was by, but it was talking about the way in which we learn from fairy tales, like how to treat little old women in cottages, you know, to sort of treat them with respect. Don't start eating their house, you know, whatever it is. We learn these things. We learn how to interact in society. And the tricksters teach us how to be cynical, how to be, you know, have a bit of nous.
How to question the things around us. I think question everything.
Yeah, having that bit of curiosity. They teach us not necessarily to trust everything at its face value. I'm thinking about the sea, that sense in which I'd much rather the sea was called the robber and I knew that she was a bit dangerous than that I sort of waded in there, as I did age 3, you know, straight into the water, almost drowned. One of my first ever memories, you know, la la la, going straight in. That's some of their function is to teach us about the power we need to wield carefully, you know, before we literally plunge in at the deep end. You know, they're there to help us to do that. And
I also think the tricksters, if you kind of analyze them, they are often the ones that have the kind of greatest amount of intellect or secret knowledge. You know, there's always some kind of, I don't know with Ran, but there's some kind of secret knowledge attached to the ones I can think of. They know something that the others don't know. And then they apply that, kind of breaking all the rules, kind of causing disharmony. But in that disharmony, it often leads to kind of new alliances being formed, new relationships coming together. And, you know, again, that change that occurs because of their interference, if you like, which I think is a big part of it, you know.
I think it's interesting that you say that. I'm reminded that I'm similar to some of the other mythologies where the gods of the sea are said to have, they possess the greatest riches. You know, their halls are made of gold. They don't have fire, they have gold that, you know, lights up the space beneath. And Ran is said to have taught Loki himself how to make nets. You know, his net is like not maker, but she is said to be the one who does that. And she lends him her net when he needs to have a particularly good net to work with. So yes, she does have cunning knowledge, and she does have things that the gods want, and the gods go down into the halls of the sea are said to be some of the best to visit. So yeah, I can see that. And part of the enchantment maybe, isn't it? Is I've got something you want.
And the sea in some ways, even today, is less explored in a way than the skies above us and the earth itself. You know, there's still this kind of enchantment and mystery about what exactly is going on there, even in the shallow waters. Did you see My Octopus Teacher, the film?
No, I didn't. I
No,
should see it, because that's what I found when I the water.
It was on Netflix. Certainly a few years ago, I watched it when lockdowns and all that kind of stuff, and it made me very, very homesick, because it was filmed in a part of Cape Town that I'm particularly kind of fond of, actually. And it was just an amazing kind of example of this one man going to this one spot, diving down with his camera to this one spot in the ocean every day for a year to follow this journey and this friendship with an octopus, basically. And it just made me really appreciate how, you know, we can observe. It's very easy to observe, say, a crow, you know, just outside here, or to, I don't know, learn about the behavior of various wild animals. You can go somewhere in the world and go and observe them. And, you know, but there's so many mysterious things going on below the ocean. It's kind of just there, but you can't see it, you know.
It's like it's the literal unseen veiled world.
Yeah, I mean, I think you came to visit me when I was living in a little hamlet in the Brecon Beacons near Hay on Wye a few years ago, and
yes.
There was this lake that we went to. I think we took some really fantastic sunset selfies. Am I right?
Yes, which I lost, and I was so upset because I love those pictures.
I mean, that's not the ocean, but that lake in particular is a fascinating lake, because it's a shallow water lake that changes. So if it's rainy, it just becomes very large. And sometimes I've been there, I'm kind of walking. I used to go and walk my son when he was a toddler there. And, you know, sometimes the water kind of just expanded. And if you looked through the water, there was this other world underneath, but it was grass. And I remember once just seeing that the mushrooms and things were still there under the water.
Wow.
You know, just like a foot or two of water, but you could see to the bottom. And it just being such a kind of surreal experience to be able to see, because the water was so clear. But of course, in the ocean is just so vast, you can't see what's going on and what's happening there. And you know, I've done quite a bit of diving when I was younger, and you always see different things, and you don't always understand what you're seeing because you're there for such a brief moment. And it's a fascinating world. You know, so colourful and so surreal, and so many beings that we just don't understand, and so much more that we probably never will discover in our lifetimes.
Yeah, absolutely. As you were just giving me the sort of images of you know, this sort of underwater or water, like preserved ships, you know, that sense of a sort of
exactly, yeah.
this
My parents live in the Western Cape now, and they're close to the most southern part of South Africa, of all of Africa really, which is by a little town called Agulhas, and it's where the two oceans meet. And there's so many shipwrecks in the water there that you could just go snorkeling and look at shipwrecks, or you used to be able to anyway. And it's just so much, you know. I had the privilege of visiting for the second or third time a museum in Bodrum in Turkey last year, which is just refines from under the sea, and they're all kind of, you know, worn away and stuff. But there's just so much there that we just don't know about, you know, and that's the human stuff that's fallen down there over the millennia. And it just holds its secrets. It just holds those mysteries of whatever's been dropped in it, you know, whether it's people that's died or ships that's gone down or treasures. And so many fantastic folkloric stories that are still developing around, you know, ships and mystery goings on. I think it's a fascinating topic.
Yeah, it really is. And that sense of with Ran being a robber, there is a sense that yes, she's stealing, but another way of looking at it was she's preserving. You know, that there are obviously some things that rot away and so on, but under the water there is so much, and it is this kingdom of the unknown that's there for us, and that you know, I'm gonna have to share the story now, so
but I think it's true, you know, if she's robbing, she is also giving, because, you know, like I said a while ago, is so many people have relied and are still relying on food that comes from the ocean today. You know, it's a very over harvested in a way resource as well, and underappreciated, because these days, you know, not all of us know people that are still going fishing with nets and making their livelihood like that. You know, so there's this kind of detachment from, you know, where our food and things are coming from, but so much comes from the ocean, so much that we rely on, and I don't think we always give thanks or appreciation for that, or even acknowledge that it's something that we are taking and maybe not giving something back for.
Yeah, I think you're right, and perhaps that we've lost that sense of what is the word I'm looking for? People used to, like, when an ancient building was created, it was often said, and a great building will take a life. No, simply because people were there and they would be, and it would happen, and creating a building that was dangerous. Going on a sea voyage is a dangerous undertaking. So although Ran is called the robber, maybe we attach a resentment to that wasn't necessarily there for our ancestors, who knew, yeah, if we're going out, the sea will take back some offerings if we don't offer those gratitudes, which is why that relationship and all of the rituals, you know, so many rituals formed by the sea to give thanks and to honor and to ask for blessings became incredibly important. And I can feel the next question bubbling up, but I can also see that we've got a question from Zoe, which fits in with what we've just been talking about. So she's asking, going back to this idea of enchantment and illusion, she says, are there certain kinds of knowledge that should be restricted or kept from the general public? She's asking whether we believe that's the case.
I think that's a really good question, Zoe, because that's all about the kind of gatekeeping topic, I guess, that we bump into a lot and that's discussed a lot. So in short, I think that should there be knowledge kept? You know, I don't think so, because I think I'm a very strong believer. I mean, I'm sitting here surrounded by books, but this is a small fraction of books that are out there in the world. So we've got books, we've got the internet, we've got knowledge available everywhere these days. So I don't think knowledge can or should be restricted. I don't actually think that any useful knowledge is really a big secret. I mean, I guess if you are holding on to some kind of scientific discovery or, you know, something like that, fine, it's your right if you've discovered something to hold on to it. But I don't think much in the way of magic or spirituality or any of these kind of things are really a secret. I think the secret is, but I think there's still a secret, and I think the secret is that it doesn't matter how many books you've got or how many gigabytes of storage you've got on some hard drive, or how much you spend on social media or in the internet. the real secret for me of magic and spirituality and, you know, enchantment, if you like, is the doing. And I don't think there's any quick fix for the doing. And I think sometimes this lack of a quick fix is mistaken for gatekeeping, which it's not. It's just that you've really got to work, and you've got to start at the bottom. You've got to get your foundations right, and you've got to go and do stuff. You've got to practice the stuff and gain experience. And there's no shortcut for that. Nobody can give you their experience. They can give you the benefit of their experience, but they can't give you their experience. So not yet anyway. So I think for me, the secret is the kind of experiential side, because experience is the only way that you're going to gain that connection, that understanding, and actually understand the worth of the knowledge, if that makes sense. Kind of talking slightly kind of in circles now, but yeah, I think it is about the kind of experience of it, and for me that is and will always be the secret.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was thinking about it in terms of gatekeeping exactly the same way, and that there is perhaps a difference between somebody who isn't really trying to function as a gatekeeper. They're just trying to sort of like be I know something you don't know, or I'm more
I mean,
worthy.
that's just
Not.
silly, you know.
And
That stuff is
yeah,
just child. I think with anybody doing that, it doesn't matter how much knowledge they've got, how much experience they've got, how old they are, how famous they are, how important they think they are. They're just being silly, because but in saying that, you know, I'm an author, and I teach on esoteric topics, as you know. I get emails from people wanting me to do their research for them, you know, asking me, you know, what's this or what's that, and often that knowledge can just be gotten by them doing the work themselves. So it's not my duty to answer these questions. Like, if I refuse to answer it, it's simply because, you know, I've got a life to lead. I can't write everybody's essays for them or provide everybody's research for them. You know, I can point you to somebody that you can pay to do it for you, and that's fine. But that's not a gatekeeping. That's just, you know, it's just like with anything in the world. If I want to learn how to be a plumber, I'm going to have to go and apply myself and do a course on plumbing. Be really useful right now if I was a plumber. But you know, it's that kind of, you've got to kind of earn your knowledge. You've got to learn and study it. No shortcuts work for it. Just like with everything else in life, you know, you can go and pay for an experience and go to a ceremony or workshop or something. But it's going to give you a glimpse of it, but it's not going to be a replacement for actually dedicating your life to it and living it on a regular basis.
Yeah. And there's some really important distinctions, aren't there, around that. All of those things build towards the difference between somebody who takes a journey that they apply themselves to, and they bring that curiosity, and they make mistakes, and they fall over, and they ask for help, and they recognize the value of what's there, and then they receive value from that.
Yes, exactly. It's about doing, it's literally about doing the work. You know, you're not, nothing in life is really free, because even the things that are free, like I love gardening, but it takes my time. You know, I'm out there yesterday when it was howling and everything was blowing around, and I was in my little, I've got a tiny greenhouse, and I was like propagating my roses, because I was like, I'm going to get something done, you know, and sowing some seeds and stuff like that. But it takes your time, it takes your energy, and actually time and energy is the one thing no amount of money can buy anyway. You know, you've got to give that to the things that you really care about. So I think anybody that thinks gatekeeping is when, you know, somebody doesn't want to give them free information or free consultation time or something like that, that's not gatekeeping. You know, gatekeeping with the kind of like, oh, I can't tell you what we do because it's a secret, you know.
Yeah, Yeah.
I think but there's also another thing, I think, especially when it comes to magical groups and societies, because there's lots of different traditions, and some of those groups do have privacy, and just like with anything else, if I was running a group, I don't owe it to anybody to tell them exactly what I'm doing,
Yes.
except to the people that's in the group. And likewise, there's also a kind of privacy and trust, which means that if, we've already said at the beginning, you and I were in the same group. I was your teacher a long, 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 long time ago, and you were a wonderful student,
Oh,
Maggie.
thank you.
So, if back then, there's something that happened in our circle and somebody had a magical experience or a vision or a breakdown of some sort, it's really none of anybody else's business. It can be discussed within that group. It's just like with any friendship, or when you in a love relationship with somebody, there's certain things that you just don't talk about outside of those relationships. And again, that kind of thing is mistaken sometimes, I think, for gatekeeping, but it's not gatekeeping. It's just it's respect and honoring those friendships and those relationships that are different from, the kind of random person asking you about it on Facebook.
Yeah, there's a sense of creating a safe space for a community to work together that's incredibly important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's just such, it's a wonderful topic to be discussing, because I think a lot of this stuff is ranted and raved about, and people have very strong opinions, but quite often those opinions are not always based on experience. And I think as you gain in experience, I fully understand things that I don't think I even understood 20 years ago, that are just really important for the integrity of personal relationships, and also for the integrity of the magic or the spiritual practices that are being done. And they're not secrets, it's just being private about it. It's just privacy. It's not a big secret that is going to give you the answers to everything. And anybody that really wants to, if they can justify it to me, can come and read all my notebooks if they're just not leaving this office. But I don't
you get to keep
because I've got a terrible handwriting. But you're not going to learn anything. You're literally not going to learn anything from all my scribbles and my notebooks, because they're for me. They notes for me, they make sense to me. And secrets are a thing, but it's more kind of knowledge that you just can't give it away. Like the plumbing example, I know plumbing involves pipes and water, but I don't know how to do it. So I pay somebody else for their skill to come and do my plumbing. And I'm patient and wait, but and it's just all like that. So when she makes the nets for Loki, it's just the same kind of thing. There's obviously an exchange or some kind of worth. Does Loki pay her for it?
Oh, that actually came up in the story that we did today. It's not in the myths.
Okay.
Yeah, I was given some suggestions as to why it might be in the story session that we did today. But I absolutely, in the Norses, the importance of value exchange cannot be underemphasized. For all of those reasons. And a lot of the topic we were discussing was the way in which Loki is bound by a blood oath to Odin, which is that they're brothers together, and what that means and how that plays out. And yeah, there's a clash there with his relationship with Ran. Yeah, we have to navigate the rules that we've set up for ourselves. I think that sense of integrity that we came back to. I have to be able to stand in integrity and say, yes, I've made this commitment, I've made these promises, I will keep them. And that it's like you were saying about magic, weren't you? It's that creating of a magical container for power to sit in. Which is not the same as saying all of these things are secret. Oh, we went deep. We swam into the waters. We may have got us slightly lost towards the end there, but
there's so many spirals and so many corners and so many possible ways of exploring, you know, all these things. But it's a good question. You know, I think this gatekeeping issue,
Yeah.
it's sometimes, I think there's an issue actually where that, bringing it back to illusion, actually, I think sometimes this idea that somebody has a secret knowledge that you know, you've got to jump through hoops to get to, can be part of an illusion that is created by the person who is holding the secret. But I've yet to kind of bump into a secret revealed to me that is actually that interesting, you know, actually something that you couldn't have figured out yourself. I mean, yes, I might not know the rituals of every single group out there, or the practices or beliefs of every single magical group out there. But you know what? You should only really be concerned with your beliefs and find the practices and things that resonate with what you believe and what is important to you. One thing I've started doing with students in recent years, just tying up with this, because I think it helps with this shattering of illusion and kind of breaking that little bubble that we quite often find ourselves put into when we start on a magical journey. And I saw this 25 years ago when I used to run, you know, Yahoo groups and little forums and things like that. And I still see the same thing with young people today, where they kind of find themselves believing what they're told really quickly, you know. So you know, whichever tradition it is, it's like, we believe in blah 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 and this and this and this, but they never question those beliefs, and because they're attracted to the vibe of that tradition or the vibe of that person, or just the idea of being slightly rebellious sometimes, which of course comes in with some of the kind of spiritual, pagan, magical, witchy kind of traditions. They end up kind of repeating, I believe in the this and the this and the this and the this, and they never question whether they actually believe it, you know, because what we actually believe is quite different sometimes from the things that we tend to repeat. And it's again, you know, it's a big subject about beliefs, but I think it's so important that if you want to have those kind of solid foundations in magical spiritual practice, it doesn't matter whether you want to become a sorcerer supreme or whether you are just the most devotional person, or whether you're just dipping your toes in. It doesn't matter where in the various scales you are. But it's so important to kind of at the beginning start kind of thinking, what do I really believe? What do I believe the gods and magic and rituals and ceremonies can do for me? What can I do for the gods? You know, how does that work? And to just question that on a regular basis as we kind of move through the years, you know, because I think it's sometimes quite surprising what you uncover in that process. Like, what do you really believe your rituals are achieving for you? And looking back, have they achieved it for you, you know, as you progress? And this is where the kind of magical diaries and all these kinds of things are important as well. But yeah, so I think illusion, it plays a big role in all kinds of aspects of that, you know, because it's so easy to just not question.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that brings us back as well. So what we were talking about Hermes and Ran and the tricksters, and finding that almost that trickster in yourself who can say, well, Sarita said that thing to me, but now I'm going to go and I'm going to take the trouble to read all the books that she's put out. I'm going to read all of the stuff that she's put out there. And then you might think, oh, well, I know everything now. That's great. And that's an illusion. You know, then you go, well, which ones am I going to apply? Yeah. Which ones am I going to try for myself? Which ones am I going to try multiple times and keep my magical diary and look back? And exactly like you said, it's
I mean, some of the books that I wrote and co-wrote, you know, a decade ago, or more, actually, because I'm getting old, I look at it and there's seriously, you know, things that now I think, oh, I could have said so much more, you know, this is so naive in some ways, but you know, the knowledge is still there and it's still part of that journey. You kind of learn and you evolve and you continue to question things. You know, I've been part of things in the past that I genuinely appreciate being part of, having been part of, that I don't want to be part of, you know, going forward in my life, because it doesn't serve me. And it served me, you know, past tense.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be who I am or where I am if I didn't have those experiences, those relationships, those I don't know, different journeys and things that we take on. So, you know, an illusion has definitely been part of some of those, you know, steps. I can't be claiming that illusion has never got me, because it certainly has.
It makes me it makes me think about when we look back over the journey that we've taken, and you imagine somebody like crossing the seas, and everything that we obviously read about deity and about mythology is other people's encounters with those deities. They're leaving us a roadmap. And what I find fascinating with the sea in particular is how many names we have for, you know, we have undines, we have monsters, we've got sirens, we've got, you know, all of these, this just teeming ocean of being that we have attempted to understand, either by naming it or perhaps by anthropomorphizing it in some way, or by labeling some things as monstrous, some things as magical, some things as illusion, some things as true, some things as false. I'm wondering about whether we're almost trying to enchant the sea ourselves. We're trying to, you know, control it with our own magics of naming and story.
I think, yeah, maybe. I think there's an aspect of that, but also maybe in a lot of mythologies, I think there's an aspect of trying to understand the sea and the strange things that people would have encountered and had no frame of reference for it. You know, there's all kinds of you know, like the Kraken, you know, people have kind of gone off looking for giant octopi in an effort to kind of say, well, you know, maybe there really was like a Kraken. But you can imagine that maybe there was a very large octopus and people just didn't understand it. Maybe they only caught a glimpse of it. Or maybe it was just seaweed and you know, moving in storms and it being scary, and people creating those stories based on what they're seeing. But then I guess there's also this kind of personification of kind of energies and natural phenomena, and, you know, kind of seeing them as deities or as spirits or as mythical beings of some sort. So I think the human mind is capable of quite a lot, really. So I think sometimes we are creating enchantments and stories, you know, for ourselves. And you know, you kind of find that in all kinds of fairy tales, actually, not just the sea creature ones, where some fairy tales you brought up, like don't eat an old lady's house, which is, you know, that's a good saying. I might use that. Eating no old ladies' houses. You know, I grow a lot of fruit and veg. I am turning into the neighborhood witch, actually. I'm just realizing that. So I always invite all the young children in the neighborhood. Come and pick my berries.
Yeah, so you're actually literally inviting them to eat your house. Yeah, that's what you're telling me, Sorita.
With their parents, you know, just with, you know, just caveat, with their parents alongside them. And I quite enjoy seeing them kind of getting excited and picking my berries. But I'm just thinking, how far is this going to go when I'm actually old? I'd be like, have my cookies.
Just be sitting there with your big basket, taking tithes as they go out. You know, you can have some of them, but give me the rest.
So kind of really funny. Sorry, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm getting old. I'm turning into the neighborhood witch. Yeah, coming back to the stories, I think we do create stories sometimes for children in order to warn them of dangers and things as well. You know, and thinking of some of the British myths around, I don't know, like Black Annis, you know, for
Yes.
example, you know, the kind of hag in the cave, don't go into the woods
Yeah.
alone because you might, you know, so there's a lot of that kind of themes that run through it. And I guess with the sea kind of being that slightly more mysterious, it's probably stories to kind of relate the strange things that people that were probably quite uneducated sometimes, they've gone out to sea, they've done their fishing, they encountered something strange, maybe they had a harrowing experience and only just got away with, you know, their lives on these small little boats, and they come back and they tell these stories, and the stories become more than maybe the reality of it. But I think personification of natural forces is a natural thing for us to want to do, really. You know, I'm glad to see that our storms now have male names as well, for example. But you know, it's storm this and storm that. You know, we're still doing it today. We're still doing it.
You're right.
And we're still referring to certain places as gendered, maybe, or as kind of being a thing. You know, if you think about it, like different places still have their different vibes and stuff. So I think it's a natural thing to personify or to understand it as a personification or as something more than what it is, just to explain it for ourselves or to warn future generations or even educate sometimes, you know.
Yeah, and I think you're right, like natural danger points or places where, you know, the fish were plentiful, that you would go again would be characterized by spirits as well that you might offer to. Just as an aside, you're reminding me not just of storms, but of planets. I'm thinking about Saturn and all its moons, and that it has all of its moons are designated as being like Titans or Jotun in the, even though if they haven't got names yet, they will have names that are mythical. And I find that fascinating, that the scientific study of planets, you know, as we develop more and more technology to see them more, we still have this desire not to call it like B12 6 or something.
Exactly.
But,
for calling them after deities or
yes, yeah,
and keeping those ideas alive.
yeah, we are, I think, keeping those ideas alive, so they're still there.
Yeah,
And
even in films and in music and stuff that is still being produced, you know, there's a fascination with these mythologies and the ideas behind them. And, you know, I think sometimes they're still conveying a message, you know, quite separate from the kind of worship of the gods or the placating of the ocean or whatever it happens to be. I think there's this kind of aspect of, you know, conveying some kind of truth about nature, a truth about a particular place, because of course a lot of beings are associated with particular bits of land and particular bits of the ocean. I'm thinking, because we brought up Hecate earlier and we've not talked about it very much, which inevitably with me always happens somewhere along the line. But I think Hecate, a being called Scylla or Skyla,
yes,
who in Greek mythology is sometimes equated to Hecate, or sometimes they to be one of her daughters. And she's this kind of weird creature that lives in the Straits of Messina, which is between Sicily and mainland Italy. You know, you kind of look at Italy as the kind of boot that kicks the ball, which is Sicily. It's that narrow bit of sea between it. And it turns up in things like the Odyssey.
yeah, because it got very dangerous.
But if you actually go there today, you can see why. You know, it's these kind of rocky bits of little rocky islands, if you like, tiny, between that, and the currents pushing through there can get quite wild. So it's not really a difficult thing to kind of see that little bit of sea as containing, you know, some very wild creature who's just out to, you know, basically damage and destroy people and their boats that are coming through it because they're not, you know, doing her bidding or not doing things the way she wants them to be doing. So, and you know, there's a lot of these stories, I think, and she's very much just in that place. She's not a kind of I guess she's a nymph, but she's just in that area. She doesn't pop up somewhere else in the
Yeah.
Aegean or down the Mediterranean somewhere. It's just there. So I suspect, you know, it's just a wonderful way. It's easier to kind of convey these things as stories than to just pass on the facts of the matter.
Yeah, I think so. And it reminds me of just as we map the stars to help us to navigate them, and we do that through stories so we can remember it. So it does a useful function. What you're describing is the same, isn't it? It's mapping our world through story, through like energetic connection with the place. Yeah, and it reminds me, Odin always says to me, he says, you know, story is the greatest illusion and the greatest reality at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples of that actually. You've got the kind of, what is it, the pillars of Hercules, one being Gibraltar and the other one thought to be this mountain in North Africa, you know, these kind of two big rocks that you had to go beyond. And if you go beyond that, that's when you kind of end up, you know, obviously coming our way of the world, you know. So it's kind of navigational points and little warnings and things attached to it.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's also so many backstories sometimes with mythology, because it evolves and it changes over a period of time. And I think we need to honour that. You know, these stories have survived for thousands of years sometimes, and they have evolved. And I think it's always a danger with this love at the moment for retelling the myths, but sometimes without understanding what they really represent. So I think it's good to retell them and to rethink them and update them for every generation. But we've always got to kind of make sure that we really understand what it is that they were originally trying to tell us, that we don't miss the, you know, the kind of knowledge completely. It's back to that thing of you know, this, all the knowledge in the world is probably available to us freely in one way or another if we made the effort. But we've got to make the effort.
Yeah, it's true, isn't it? You have to make the effort. And I think that, you know, I do a lot of oracular story now. I do a lot of retelling of myths, and for me, that's partially because the oral tradition is so important. And each time you retell, there might be something slightly different, some nuance which is important for that moment. But you have to know the core that you're drawing.
Exactly. I mean,
Oh, I've lost. There you go. You just muted for a minute.
You know, you're not doing it based on 5 minutes of research on Wikipedia. You know,
well, sometimes Wikipedia can be fun, but yes.
Wikipedia is great, but you know, it's you've done more than that. You've spent decades at this point. I'm sorry, Maggie, but you're also getting old.
Or just an illusion.
It's all an illusion, exactly. So I think it's a question of you know, kind of putting it into perspective. Is you've had decades of experience and knowledge that you've gained from dedicated research, dedicated work, dedicated exploration and experiences. So, you know, the myths are oral stories. That's why I'm saying, you know, there's so many different versions of them, but you've got to go back to the roots of it and understand where and what they're really trying to convey. And as long as you can convey that same story in a way that maybe is more suited for our time, then that's fine. You know, I don't, that's something I applaud and totally engage with and have done myself, because sometimes it's just necessary to cut out all the archaic stuff and fill in the blanks as well, you know, because there are a lot of blanks even in the things that were written down, because not everything survived and not everything does survive, but then there's enough that survives that we can continue to kind of weave those stories and connect to the kind of ultimate, sometimes quite primordial truths that are somehow captured in these fairy tales, if you like, or mythologies, or whatever they happen to be.
Yeah, it's almost like a archaeological expedition is what I find every time we do. We take the fragments and we piece them together, and then sometimes we find a shape that we didn't notice before and we go, oh, That's something that I didn't see before. No, which is another reason why we don't need gatekeepers, because you have to listen so many times, because then you find the thing that you're looking for. It's your journey. No one else can take it for you, as you said.
Nobody else can take it for you. And I think anybody that thinks they're a gatekeeper, I've got quite strong words for it. Because I just think they at the base, bless them, they probably don't know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I think that the deep magics can take care of themselves
They can
and
totally.
draw the people to them that are truly.
It's, that's so true, Maggie. I've been talking to somebody about a particular tradition that's had a lot of gatekeeping issues, actually. I'm just putting two and two together, and just kind of emphasizing to this person who's going through a really difficult time and looking to leave this tradition, but they're deeply in love with the mythology and the gods and the spirits of that tradition. And I kind of said something to them that I had for myself some years ago, kind of dawned on me when I was going through something similar, which is that the gods don't belong to any tradition or group. If they're real gods and goddesses or spirits that really predate the groups cannot possibly own the gods.
Yes.
The traditions can't own these gods. It's the other way around. So you can worship, you can explore, you can get to know, you can learn, you can enter into a relationship with gods and spirits and myths, and you can practice rituals, but you've got to put the effort in. There's a shortcut in a way when you join a group or tradition, because there's a community and you kind of have that kind of benefit of the group and other people's experiences and stuff coming together. But there's no such thing as secret knowledge. It's something that the secret knowledge is the experience. It's gnosis, if you like, experiential knowledge, and that is a secret. But it's a secret in the same way that, I don't know, how do I convey to you what it feels like when I eat a mango?
Yeah.
I can explain to you how it feels when I eat a mango. It's really ripe and delicious and amazing.
Slimy.
Well, if it's not great, yeah. But the best way for you to learn what it tastes like is just to do it yourself, and probably to do it several times over. Because if you have a really rubbish mango the first time, you'd be like, oh, I don't like mango. But you're probably missing out because you've only tried it once and you tried it one that wasn't great.
Yes.
So, it's experience is at the root of that, differentiation. I think it's so important.
We are coming towards the end of our time, and we have discussed illusion. I know. We discussed illusion and enchantment in the context of deity. We've discussed it in the context of place. I wanted to ask about time, because I know that like Beltane is obviously coming up at the moment that we're doing this recording. It always feels to me, people talk about the veils getting thinner and all of those things. It always feels like there is more enchantment, more possibility of illusion, like in the air, as we start to move towards Beltane. Do you associate like particular times with enchantment and magic?
I think that springtime, this period between spring equinox and Beltane, and maybe a week or two after that, maybe all the way into midsummer, actually, in the British Isles at least, is a time of great enchantment. And I think there's many reasons for it. I think the land is waking up, everything's growing, the saps are physically rising. And for me, in what I believe, at least, there's more activity from kind of nymphs and kind of genus local spirits and the land spirits, ancestral spirits that are kind of linked to where we are, because there's more movement as well. We tend to be out and about more than we are, it's cold and wet and miserable and dark. So I think there's that aspect of the land waking up that brings with it all that possibility and the hope, and at the same time this kind of bubbling up of energy, because there is something special about it, you know. And I don't think it's just on Beltane Eve. I think it's a period of time. I work a lot with the lunar cycles in recent years, so for me, I kind of calculate that whole period slightly differently, you know, according to new and full moons and things like
Yeah.
that. But you know, there's definitely something different about it, and I think it's a fantastic time to explore new things as well. And you know, look towards, if this time of great enchantment and magic and energy, kind of looking for ways to understand the world around you and question the things that you hold sacred, so that you can really connect with them deeper. You know, questioning what you believe and what you're told can only, if they right, they can only kind of cause you to enter into a deeper relationship with it.
Mm.
If it doesn't, then probably you're going to face something that you need to kind of remove from your life. And you know, I believe in spring cleaning in a big way. You know, I think
Yes.
it's also a very good time, and it's not just about having a tidy house, it's about clearing out that kind of debris and the things that clutter up your mind, and making space for new things to come, you know,
Yes.
and appreciating the kind of things that you've got in a more beautiful and more intricate way. So I think it's so it's just a wonderful time of the year. And I think you know, that whole idea of the veils being thin, for me at least, goes on for a period of time, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And I've been following, well, we've been following in the Hearthspace much more closely the lunar cycles. And so we've done a big transition, because I was just like, the calendar months are not working for me anymore. And
No.
we need to deepen into it. And it has been really fascinating. And what you were saying there about the spring energy, it makes me think also of the harvest isn't yet ready to be reaped, you know, that takes all of the
No.
attention at that point. There is more possibility for things like sitting out, you know, through the night, keeping vigil. You know, it's not freezing cold tonight in the snow somewhere. You can go, you can walk further, because there are berries and other things like available or starting to be available. No, so you're not as tied to your path. It's a
Yeah,
good time for travel.
there's more light in the day as well, you know,
Yes.
especially in our kind of more northern areas and stuff. It's so obviously easier. The days are definitely longer, and so from an exploration and learning perspective, there's just a lot more opportunity.
Yeah. So I almost for me see it as a, well, that this is also the time where our ancestors would have had more room and more space for that kind of connection with their world. So if they're going to be whispering to us and saying, come on, no, you're ready for the next adventure, this is the time that they would be doing. Ah, now I know that you've got some plans hatching at the moment and things for events that you're hosting. I'd love to, if you would tell us a little bit about them, what you have coming up.
Yeah, sure. So in about 3 weeks' time, at the full moon, that's the first full moon in May, we've got the Rite of a Sacred Fires, which is a devotional ritual that I wrote in 2010, that's done internationally by many hundreds, if not thousands of people every year, to the goddess Hecate. And I'll be hosting an online gathering for that on the 5th of May. Information is on my Facebook group, I
Yeah,
guess.
and
And
I can post
I
anything
can,
as
I
well
can
after
post
this.
the link over, yeah.
Great.
It's completely free. You just have to sign up on Eventbrite so that I can send you information at the time. And it would just be amazing. Usually, you know, a few dozen people light candles during the kind of live session in different places in the world. And they just say their names and where they are. And it's a really wonderful way of connecting with other devotees, and especially if people working by themselves, just that idea that actually there are other people out there doing the same thing. And I'll be hosting a physical celebration for that on our land, weather dependent. Otherwise, it will be in my home somehow, where I do TARDIS-like things to a room.
Which I have seen Sarita do, by the way. You know, she's
my
not using it. I don't know how you do it.
my TARDIS skills are extraordinary. I don't know. I'm going to praise myself for that. You know, I kind of, there's a room in my house that I've actually had 40 people in, and it's not a hall. I don't know how I did it.
I don't know how you've done it. See, I said to everyone that you are the queen of enchantment, and yes.
I can keep it just for an hour, you know, well, a few hours, just to keep it, you know, make it happen. So if the weather's bad, we'll come inside. And again, there's a private group for that, the Sanctuary of Hecate Soteira, because that's based here in Glastonbury. And it will be a fun group, actually. We've got some international friends that are kind of joining me, other devotees, flying in from and traveling in various ways from other parts of the world. So it should be fun. And those two things are both completely free. People can just join. At some point later in this year, but we've not quite announced the dates, Emily Carding and I will be running another Torchlit Path, which
fabulous.
is a 9-week kind of devotional journey with Hecate, where we encourage people to create their own devotional practice. So we don't provide one, we just say, let's kind of work on the skills to develop that. And other than that, I am basically spending most of this spring and summer writing and editing and finishing off lots and lots of projects. So we're also doing some building work here, so that I'll eventually have a little space to run workshops from home in. So I'm really excited about that, because it's a nice separate space, and we put so much insulation in it that it's probably going to be quite soundproof for some noise making. So yeah, watch this space. If anybody's interested, they can pop over to my website, join my mailing list. I don't send a lot of emails, but they will get emails when there are events. I'm really bad with marketing and stuff.
Well, like you say, you have the flames burning bright to draw people in, and, you know, having participated in the sacred fires right over many years, you know, it is such a beautiful rite and such a wonderful connection.
And
so
you were part of the team of contributors. You've put a beautiful image on the cover of the book that inspired the ritual, in fact.
Indeed.
It just came about. Oh, look, I've even got a copy on my desk. I was just thinking I should have had a copy. But look, everybody, it's Megan's artwork right in the middle here.
Yeah, that is my piece there. One of those moments where I was just like, I really need to do a painting for Hecate. I don't know why, but I'm going to do this painting. And I said to Sarita, I've done this painting. And she's like, oh, that's the middle image for the cover of the book.
The artwork is actually there's 4 other images here, which are by Emily Carding, Brian Andrews, Georgi Mishev, and Shay Skapetsky in Australia, Bulgaria, England, and also in London, and then of course you in the middle. But it just ties it together so beautifully. There's a beautiful tattoo on the back as well.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, it's a lovely book as well. You know, there's just wonderful resources, and yeah, if you've not worked with Hecate before, just go and do the right, is what I would say, and start off with that. And yeah,
it was a really interesting project, this, bringing together so many people's opinions and experiences and stuff. I learned so much from doing that.
Yeah, it was I loved, yeah, I've participated in a few of those projects now, but I particularly loved it.
Yeah.
They were wonderful.
In fact, your artwork is on the first ever little kind of
anthology
that I did about Hecate as well. I'll have to do another one and just commission you to do the artwork for that. I'm not even going to go and look for anybody else. I've decided.
Excellent. I shall look forward to that commission in the future.
I think this was in 2010. So actually it's 13 years this year.
Can you believe it? Can you believe it?
That's so interesting. Time just whoosh by.
It has whooshed by, and Candice is saying that she would love to see more of us both in conversation because it was so fascinating and she really enjoyed it. Vicky is saying, amazing chat, the mind spins. Yes, indeed. Obviously that was because of the topic and nothing to do with Sarita and I getting together and meandering through magic.
We went off in all kinds of directions there, didn't we?
So I would like to say such a huge thank you to all of those who have joined us, whether you've been with us for the whole thing, or whether you've dipped in, or whether you're coming for the recording. It has been lovely hosting this, and obviously a huge huge thank you to Sorita for being with us and for offering so much of your experience and your wisdom and rolling with me on the questions as we went through. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been wonderful to spend time with you. Thank you so much for having me. And I would be very happy to come back and talk to you about anything, really. It's
excellent. I'll hold you to that. And the group is saying yes. Thank you, Sarita. Lots of love to you. I'll speak to you very soon.